I'm live. I was just sending a message to someone, Andrew, who gave one of these topics that I have for us today, but also said, make sure you don't go live privately, which is precisely what happened last time I did this. So let's get this here. That allows me to see all the comments. Mute that. Bam. Close that. Nice. Okay, now we've got it all lined up, guys. Here we go. Hey, Andrew. Good morning. Let's start this off the correct way to start off any live, which is the pouring of the tea. The battle teapot, the mug with Chip and Dale on it, the tea steaming out of the teapot, the roar of the crowd, the crack of the bat. What would it be for tea? The heat of the steam, the moisture of the tea, the smell of the bergamot. Exciting. What a fun event. And we'll just waft it in here. Smells like Alpine Punch. It's appropriate for the weather. Kind of festive. Ooh, that's nice. I like sometimes if Bay's doing something. A UPS guy just walked by my window to drop a package off for us, and he's got a mask on, and I love that. Sometimes when I'm trying to annoy Bay in the morning, which happens quite frequently, what I'll do is I'll sip my tea like this. And my wife and I have this game. I don't know if she's a willing participant in the game. I think she might secretly be. But the game becomes, how long can Adam do that annoying thing before she cracks and smiles? And it's like the most rewarding thing in the world because I can tell that what I'm doing is kind of amusing to her, but she really doesn't want to give me the satisfaction of it. So she'll sit there sort of with this disapproving look on her face, but I can see right there in her cheeks because she doesn't have a beard to hide it that she's close. And boy, getting those laughter, that's that's some of the most rewarding stuff that I get in my marriage. That's not true. There's lots, but that's very fun. If you're married, you probably know what I'm talking about. Hey, Alexandra. Hey, Evan. Thanks for your suggestions, guys. Great topics. Really like that. Let's see. We're at. It's hard for me to believe we're at the end of the 6 month period. December starts in 4 days, but I'm taking the 30th off for the most part. I think I've got a call in the creating clients group that will be on, and then that's the end of work for me for the next month. I say that like I'm not going to do a bunch of stuff, which is not at all the way it goes. I'm going to talk more about the December break and how that looks and what I've learned through the time of doing that. But it's hard. It's just hard to imagine. Like, holy crap! It's already December. It feels like just yesterday that it was March, and we were all starting to be like, oh my God, coronavirus. And then April, we are like, oh, what a drag. April's taking forever, which was true. April took like 50 years, and then there was the times when done. Hey, Mara. Good morning. I guess it's good afternoon for you. What do I want to talk about? Well, so first of all, it's gone quick. We're currently in a state of lockdown here in BC, where anytime you're out in public, even outdoors, you're wearing masks. And there's a few things I want to talk about as far as masks are concerned, or more like our impact. So I'm going to cover that. And I want to read from this book, The Untethered Soul, because I think, Andrew, you mentioned it in response to something I'd posted today, and then someone else had mentioned it. And it just so happened that I was reading a passage from this to a friend that's really valuable. So the way I want to come into this is by sharing that a lot of the stuff I talk about in these lives on my podcast, if you follow my podcast, a lot of this stuff is not it's not stuff I'm just making up. And I see a lot of that where we kind of people call themselves coaches and then are like just start making things up, or they strategize and they create the perfect strategy and then they want to sell you the strategy. I wrote a post about this the other day about people creating the perfect marketing stuff. Like I always get reached out to by these people, and there's nothing wrong with them. They're doing their work. They're doing what they need to do to make money, and hopefully they're making some money. But it's always like, here's the things you need to do. And there's this feeling I'm often left with, which is that like, that's what they've concluded they need to do. And now they've turned around and they're selling that to people because those people have the same problem they had and they've overcome that problem forever. So then you could also overcome the problem, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. So let me read from this and then I'm going to tie it back to how that pertains to me and to the fact that I'm not making this stuff up and how I create some of the distinctions I create. So this is from chapter 9. It's called Removing Your Inner Thorn. And this won't be too long. You can see it. The Untethered Soul fits the spine test. Got a bunch of markers in there. Those are the spots I'm liable to read from or that I think are awesome and go back and revisit. In truth, I don't always go back and revisit books, but I always mark them this way because even the act of marking the book is like there's something about it's like I'm setting an intention to remember that passage. So I may never go back. Some of these I've probably never gone back and read, and yet I think there's still value in me saying this spot I really like. I remember listening to someone on a podcast and they were rereading their grandfather's books. They're going through his library, and their grandfather, they would say, had all these, thanks, Tom, had all these notes in the margins of the books, thoughts written by hand. And every now and then in the book, he'd write, ah. And I always loved that idea. I thought, oh, that's such a cool idea. Ah. So that's what these tabs are for me. Okay, here we go. Let's have a sip of tea to start before story time. Imagine that you have a thorn in your arm that directly touches a nerve. When the thorn is touched, it's very painful. And because it hurts so much, the thorn is a serious problem. It's difficult to sleep because you roll over on it, and it's hard to get close to people because they might touch it. It makes your daily life very difficult. You can't even go for a walk in the woods because you might brush the thorn against the branches. This thorn is a constant source of disturbance, and to solve the problem, you have only two choices. The first choice is to look at your situation and decide that since it's so disturbing when things touch the thorn, you need to make sure nothing touches it. The second choice is to decide that since it's so disturbing when things touch a thorn, you need to take it out. Believe it or not, the effects of the choice you make will determine the course of the rest of your life. Let's begin with the first choice and explore how it'll affect your life. If you decide you have to keep things from touching the thorn, then that becomes the work of a lifetime. If you want to go for a walk in the woods, you'll have to thin out the branches to make sure you don't brush against them. Since you often roll over and touch the thorn when you're asleep, you need to come up with a solution for that as well. Perhaps you could design an apparatus that acts as a protective device. And if you really put a lot of energy into it and your solutions seem to work, you would think that you had solved your problem. You'd say, I can sleep now. And guess what? I got to go on TV to give a testimonial. Anybody who has a thorn problem can get my protective device, and I even get paid royalties. So now you've got a whole life built around this thorn, and you're quite proud of it. You keep the woods thinned out, and you wear the apparatus to bed at night. But now you have a new problem. You've fallen in love. This is a problem because in your situation, it's hard to even hug. Nobody can touch you because they might touch the thorn. So you design another kind of device that allows closeness amongst people without actually touching. Eventually, you decide you want total mobility without having to worry about the thorn anymore. So you make a full-time device that doesn't have to be unstrapped at night or changed over for hugging or other daily activities. But it's heavy. So you put wheels on it, control it with hydraulics, and install collision sensors. It's actually quite impressive. Of course, you had to change the doors in the house so that the protective apparatus could get through, but at least now you can live your life. You can go to work, you can go to sleep, you can get close to people. So you announce boldly to everyone, I have solved my problem. I am a free being. I can go anywhere I want. I can do anything I want. This thorn used to run my life. Now it doesn't run anything. The truth is, the thorn completely runs your entire life. It affects all your decisions, including where you go, who you're comfortable with, and who's comfortable with you. It determines where you're allowed to work, what house you can live in, and what kind of bed you can sleep on at night. When it's all said and done, the thorn is running every aspect of your life. Amazing. So he presents that at the start like it's a choice for us, like, oh, like we're staring at this thorn in our arm and we're like, well, I got two choices. So I guess I'll choose one of these one thing or the other thing. But the thing is that the thorns we have, our inner thorns, they've been there since childhood, and we cannot distinguish that the thorn is the thing. What we're present to is the pain the thorn causes. And so it's actually a conversation we're in about, huh, given that I get caused pain when something happens around my arm, do I protect myself from having things happen around my arm, or do I get at the root of the pain and do the work to have it not be so painful when things touch my arm? We don't realize there's a thorn there. We don't have any awareness of that. And as a result, the change we affect is almost always about protecting our thorn. We're building those apparatus. We're building the woods that way. We're thinning out the woods so that we don't get touched on the arm. We're finding people that aren't very touchy because those people touch our arm. And when we're around people that tend not to be very touchy, they don't touch our arm, and then our arm doesn't hurt, and then I get to feel safe and secure and all of that stuff. And so the result of that is then we are trying to solve these problems on our own. We can't see the thorn. We can only feel and be present to the impact of it. We build these solutions, and then we go into the world and we call ourselves a coach and we sell these solutions to people. And so that's what is happening in large degree in a profession like coaching, even in counseling. Counseling's a little more regulated, so this happens, it's got its own issues, but it happens less the way it often does in coaching or other modern self-help approaches, which is that what most people are doing is that they've figured out how to prevent their inner thorn from getting bumped. They've developed the device, and now they're selling you the device, and they're promising you too never have to fear this particular kind of pain. You too can act out these algorithms, these recipes, this apparatus that I've created, and you too will never ever be stopped by your thorn again. When in fact, your whole life is dictated by that thorn. And so where that ties in here is that it's important for me to share that all of the stuff I'm creating in these conversations here, the podcast, when I'm coaching someone, it's almost always a function of me bringing my solution to my thorn to my coach, being like, my arm hurts. I'm pretty sure what I need to do is like build an apparatus. And then my coach helps me see the thorn underneath. And I want to be really clear that when my coach is gently inviting, it's not even that she's not saying, Adam, you have a thorn and you need to look at it. She's just getting curious with me and is not sort of in the pain of my arm. So she doesn't feel the urgency I have to fix this problem. She doesn't feel the urgency to move me away from it or anything like that. She's able to just hold the space and invite me to stay in that space and to get curious. And as we do that, what happens is at first I'm like, fuck off. I know the solution. I've thought about this already. I just need help actually making it happen. And as she invites me to sit in that and to really get curious and to really take a look and to deepen my exploration, my inquiry, rather than trying to fix something showing up, what happens is I start to see, holy fuck, here's a place where I have a thorn. And then I have to do the hard work of removing the thorn, which is hard because when you try to remove something that's been there for so long, you'll miss it at times and that'll hurt. You're going to like, it's hurting. I need to go back to the apparatus. And so this is part of the reason coaches, we so need to be continually in our own work, is because our inevitable nature is to protect our thorn and then to turn to other people and try to sell them the tools, the tricks, the techniques to help them protect their thorn. And it's why coaching has a bit of a bad rap. It's one of the reasons, is because it creates these short-term results while long-term just keeps you further and further imprisoned in what holds you fast in your life. So a bit of a downer, I'll start us off on, but important because I want to be clear that there's no guru over here. I want to share my process and be honest about the fact that most of this is a function of having to having to set down the apparatus. And I want to share how much I love the apparatus. I like to have the solution. I'm good at figuring out solutions. That is how I got into coaching, was like, I figured out a bunch of solutions to solve the problems in my life. And now I want to share that. I want to sell that to other people, tell them what to do. My Hmm. There's a story I want to share, but I want to honor confidentiality. Let me just sit with it for a moment. Maybe I won't. I'll come back to that. Um, let's talk about something fun. Since I brought us down, bring us something fun here. I've been designing shoes. And so the way this happened was this is a great example of how we can create connection in any opportunity, any moment. One of the things that people going through the creating clients course have been learning is how to actually create connection and how to make it abundant, how to be in an abundance of connection and to create an abundance of connection regardless of where you are, moment by moment. And when we hear this, often our sort of reaction is like, oh, yeah, yeah, abundance of connection. Great, got it. Get done with that. On to the next thing. But how do I make them pay me? Which is just like, well, first you actually have to do the thing we just talked about that you stepped right the fuck over because that's what we do. We're like, but I need the clients now. So a friend of mine, a coach named Hans Phillips, who's a brilliant coach and actually founded the coach training I used to lead and went through and provided me so much. Hans and I are friends, and he sends out a newsletter every couple of weeks. It's much more consistent than mine is. And in this newsletter, he just mentioned this guy. He said, "Hey, this guy's doing some cool stuff. You know, check him out if you're into clothing or something." And I was like, "Well, hold the phone because I am into clothing, and this guy's well dressed and seems cool. Let's look what he's up to." And so I went to his website and I saw bespoke shoes. Bespoke, for those of you that don't know, means like something that is created specifically for you. And in this context, it meant like a shoe, I got to say, I want it to look like this, I want that, this is how I want it to be shaped, blah, 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 blah. And he actually had a shoe designer thing on his website. So you could like model this shoe in 3D and be like, I want like leather crocodile and I want like tweed and I want this and that. And I was looking at this and I was like, two things happened. One is I got excited because I love as this part of my art is in style. I love dressing. I love clothing. I love shoes. I love the artistry, especially in shoes and the history behind them, the cobblers and the craftsmanship in it. And so the second thought I had though was I've done this before and it sucks. I have purchased suits from Indochino where you can in theory get a suit made tailored to fit for you, and what you will get is a cheaply made suit. It's not the worst, it's passable, but you'll feel this is actually a vest, a remnant from Indochino, and I can feel the thinness of it. And like it misses elements like what's called interfacing. Interfacing is when you have two pieces of fabric that run against each other, and you would perhaps line it with something like flannel because that will create a bit more friction. Whereas if you have two pieces of silk, if you ever tried to tie a silk nightrobe, the silk just it's smooth. It runs off from each other because there's no interfacing. So anyhow, the point I will put the link there, Mara. I will do that in just a second. I want to show you what I've created first, and then I'm going to put it there. So I wrote him and said, "Hey, man, one more thing. I also have used a site called Undandy, which is all about, hey, design your own shoes, create your shoes." And I was so excited, and I created it. And Undandy sent me these shoes, and I was so disappointed because it didn't look the way it looked on the site. The leather felt cheap. It was thin. I was just like, oh man. Even to the point where I wrote Undandy and I said, hey, thanks for these. I'm not going to send them back because I've worn them a few times. So I just want you to know I'm really disappointed. And to their credit, they said, hey, we'd love to have you give us another chance. We really think we can meet the mark for you. We'll give you 50% off, which I was like, okay, and a clean pair would be fine, but I'm willing. That sounds all right. So they gave me a big discount and they sent me back to their site and I did it. And what do you know? The same thing happened. So I really appreciate them for their customer service, but the product they're committed to providing is not up to the craftsmanship that I'm committed to. And so I wrote this guy and I said, man, this has been my experience and I'm disappointed. And almost right away, my phone rings and it's the dude. I'm like, oh, look at that. Guy's calling me. And so we start to chat and he's like, yeah, I totally get it. Those things don't work. They're not good. They're mass produced and that's how they kind of make their mark and it's about scaling up. So we talked, and I got this real feeling of quality from this person, and so I was like, okay, cool. Let me design some shoes, and I'll take a swing. We'll see how it goes, um, and hey, if this turns out right, you're gonna make a lot of money off of me because I love doing that, and I've always wanted to be able to design my own clothing and shoes, but I can't because I'm not very good at sewing. And so these are the shoes I designed. I'll show them to you. They're what's called an Italian sneaker, which is sort of a bit of a tapered toe at the top. I chose all of this. The only thing that was not chosen was the shape of the shoe and the fact that it had like these dots and that it had laces and eyelets for them. So I chose the tweed patterning you can see there on the toe box and the whatever this is called. I chose the different colors of leather. I chose this little detail of cognac leather at the back. I chose the color of the eyelets, the color of the laces, and I chose this lining to be orange because I think that's a cool little feature on this shoe. And what you probably can't see over camera is how exquisitely made this shoe is. The leather is gorgeous. It's really beautifully done. And shockingly, it's not exorbitantly priced. This is going to cost you more than a regular sneaker because it's bespoke. It's not made in a factory along with 50 million other Reeboks. This is the only shoe of this kind made. Maybe he's using this design and selling people to Quiney now. I don't know. But in any event, if you are interested in something like this, if you are interested in gifting someone something like this, possibly something I'm going to start gifting my clients as a shoe I designed for them. We'll see how that goes over. Then I really recommend this guy's work. He's doing beautiful work. His website is called Big Murphy's, which I'll put in here. There you go. Evan, to your question, I'm starting to design a pair of crocodile loafers because I think they're gorgeous and I want them. And I'm also conscious of the fact that I'm not filling a closet with more stuff I don't need. I'm looking at, hey, what do I need? What shoes are dying and ready to be replaced by something really quality that'll last a long time, as opposed to that I'll replace next year and then next year. So definitely check out. His name's Nathan. He's a real beauty. He'll chat your ear off. And he and I have just gotten into conversation and then started to create a friendship. And from that, the next thing that happened was we were just chatting about his story, and he mentioned this event he went to called Secret Knock. And he was like, yeah, do you know so-and-so? He was the co-creator of Chuck E. Cheese. I'm like, yeah, of course I know the co-creator of Chuck E. Cheese. Funnily enough, I do. I know one of them, but not the other one. Evan, emerging? Really? That's, well, we'll talk about that later. Emerging. Anyhow, he's talking about this guy, and I'm like, oh, what's Secret Knock? What is that thing? And that turns out to be this networking sort of event that 250 people around the world come to every year. It's a lot of high net worth individuals, and he's like, man, you should go. You'd love that, and they would love you. Let me make an introduction. So all of this began not because I was looking for a client. It didn't begin, and I don't have a client, just to be clear, but like none of this happened because I was like, where are the people I need to meet? This grew because I wanted to connect with someone. I was like, I love shoes. I'm going to look into what this guy's doing. And then he was doing something I was interested in, and I wrote him. I was like, hey, what's the deal? Can we talk? And then when he called me, that's him connecting, I picked up the phone instead of saying, fuck it, I'm not going to talk to him. And so this is the magic that happens when we get into an abundance of connection. We don't know where it's going to lead, but because we're able to let go of where it goes and simply sit in the abundance, it can lead us wherever it leads us. And if you are willing to follow those trails and just find joy in connecting with people, what you'll discover is, holy crap, things are starting to just manifest themselves in my life. They're not manifesting things in your life the way people think of it, where it's like, I'm going to manifest this. And what they really mean is I'm going to sit on my ass and do nothing and hope that this comes to me. They manifest because you are acting in your life. You're telling people what you're up to. You're sharing your path, and you're connecting with the world. You're co-creating as you go forward. So love that story personally. Highly recommend his work. He is a beauty. It's cool just to look through his shoe gallery if you want to see a bunch of cool looking shoes. Anyhow, let's talk to these topics at hand. I'm going to open this window. All right. Get that fan on, a little toasty. I feel like I could You could come into a saloon and find me gambling in it based on how I'm dressed and the way my hair looks today. I feel like that would be a good fit. Maybe a cigar, maybe yeah, maybe one of these bad boys in my mouth. I have 3 cigars in my desk because the other day I was like, I feel like smoking a cigar. And then, as often is the case, I bought a cigar and then I just didn't. It just sits in my desk. These will get smoked at some point. One of the things that's nice about a cigar for me is I have there's no compulsion towards it. I have compulsion towards a lot of things. Cigars are not one of them. They're just a nice thing once in a while, and then I throw all the clothing that I was wearing when I smoked it into the garbage and take a bath, and then another one to try to get the smell out, and so on and so forth. All right. Um, I want to talk. Let's talk about Evan wrote this question. Thanks, Carl. Herringbone. Got the old H bone on this coat. So Evan asks, where did you put this, Evan? Here it is. Because I see possibility in everyone, how do I stop feeling annoying in wanting to serve them? And maybe we'll go one step further and say, how do I stop being annoying in wanting to serve them? So what Evan's talking about here is, first and foremost, part of what the being of coach is. What I mean by the being of coach is not necessarily anything you're doing, but the way you show up in the world is that you are actively curious about what would be possible in everyone's life. So that means, like, if you're talking to someone that you meet at a networking event and they're describing their boring job to you, they're like, yeah, I work in computers and I go in and I work 9-hour days and I write code and it's all good. And you're like, this person's bored out of their mind about their own job, and they're succeeding in making me feel that way too. Rather than just try to end the conversation or hate their face or any of the other things that I've done in the past, our job is to really be curious about, like, it's interesting. This person's sort of bored in their job. Who are they? Like, who underneath what's showing up in this moment are they? And what's possible for them if they move beyond the stuff that's currently stopping them? And we might start to ask questions from that place, not to get them somewhere, but just from a genuine curiosity, like, what is this what you want to do? Well, kind of, maybe. Oh, okay. Well, where would you want to go? What do you want to do? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Is it still this company? No, no. I mean, honestly, on the side, I'm kind of building this windsurfing company. Now we're learning about their possibility. So our job as coach, first and foremost, is to be in a continued curiosity, unspoken or otherwise, about the possibility of every single human being we come into contact with. Rather than what typically happens, which is what most of us do is we meet someone, we're like, this person's fucking boring. How do I get out of this conversation and go talk to someone else who's less boring? In that instance, we're relating them entirely as the way they're showing up in this moment. We have no curiosity about their possibility. So Evan's asking the question really like, hey, given that I'm doing that, given that I'm seeing what's possible for people, how do I not be, well, let me add one more part. Once you can see what's possible for someone, you're going to be presented with a conundrum, which is, here's what's possible for them, and here's where they are. The ever elusive potential, that one, which is like, you have a lot of potential, which is kind of like, you could translate that into, you are not doing enough. You are lazy. You are not, like, there's such an you're not enoughness to it. It sucks. It sucks being told you have a lot of potential. Fuck you. Tell me what I am right now. Acknowledge me for who I'm being in this moment. That's what sets people free. Tell them they have potential is like telling them you're not doing enough. So now we have the conundrum of, like, we could call it the heartbreak of learning. This is why most of us don't stay present very long to people's possibility, is because as you get present to what is, the way they're showing up now, or what is anything, and what's possible, you're also going to get present to the gap between those two. And that creates heartbreak. The gap between where we are and what could be. The gap between what you wanted to have happen in your relationship and what did happen. The gap between the thought of going to Disneyland and actually finding out you're not going to be able to go to Disney. These are all examples of the possibility coming into conflict or clashing or hitting up against the fact that it's not necessarily what is. And so people adopt a whole bunch of strategies to deal with this. One of them is stop dreaming, stop seeing possibility. And so then if you never let yourself see possibility, you're not going to experience a lot of heartbreak because there's nothing you can see beyond what currently is. Right? If you never get your expectations up, you will never be disappointed. Now, the downside to this is you end up living your life with a fuck ton of resignation because all that you're able to be present to is what already is. So you're basically resigned to your current reality. And that's basically where we end up with people is resigned to their current reality. They're like, oh, well, yeah, I'm working at the computer company and blah, 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 blah. And you're like, fuck, this person's boring. And you have now resigned yourself to their current reality. It's like you've gotten into the same spot as them. So what Evan's asking is how do I deal, I think, is ultimately like, how do you deal with this gap? And when people first start training as a coach, first start becoming a coach, they first learn this gap. And then what they want to do when they see it is shove people right to it. Get the fuck over to your possibility. So now instead of grinding down possibility and not getting our expectations up, we're getting our expectations up. We're seeing what's possible for this person. And then we're sort of like, it's almost like we're vibrating as we're listening to them explain to us why life has to be the way it is. And we're like, no, it doesn't. We want to scream in their face. So what do we do with that? This is a great example of how the answer I have is a function of what I've learned. This isn't a universal truth. It's what I've discovered in my own exploration, which is, first of all, my dad is a man who can see people's greatness very clearly. He's very present to it. However, I would say that over time, he couldn't stay open with the disappointment that created for him. Not the disappointment towards other people, nor the disappointment others might have in himself. And so often he would point to their greatness, but with a closed heart, because it's safer that way. And when we point to someone's greatness from a closed heart, it comes across as you're not enough, you're not adding up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We've had that feeling, it's like when people tell you you have enough potential and what we're like, they're saying those words, but their being is coming across like you're not fucking adding up, add up. And so, of course, I went into my life and did the exact same thing because that's what I learned, because that's what he learned, because that's what his dad learned, because that's what, and so on up the chain, all the way past the bloodline. These wounds carried down through the bloodline. And so I learned to do that, to deal with this, we could call it a gift and a curse of seeing people's possibility, but at the same time, seeing that where they are is not there, where they are is here. And in truth, I still experience the heartbreak around that. And there are times still when I want to scream at someone, when I'm on a call where they've told me how much they want to work with me because of how clear they are about what they want to create in their life. And it's the fourth call we've had, and it's the fourth call where they're just reiterating how their life has to be the way it is, and maybe next year, even though they keep asking for these calls. And I'm just like, it's never going to be next year. Can you not see that? It drives me nuts. It drives me bonkers. And what I've discovered is the key for me is learning to be with my own heartbreak and disappointment. Learning to stay open and feel the agony and the pain of the heartbreak and disappointment that staying open causes. Chogyam Trungpa, I didn't always get his name wrong. Rinpoche Trungpa. I don't know. I think Rinpoche was his title, and then Chogyam Trungpa was his name. Brilliant, brilliant man. Definitely interesting character to read about. And if you want a book of his, I recommend Shambhala. He brought Tibetan, I believe it was Tibetan Buddhism in large part over to the West, but also was a crazy alcoholic and died at about 43. Very young, very, very wise. Perfect contradiction, the yin and the yang. Anyhow, he wrote that the path of the warrior, as you are a warrior for love and you open your heart more, you're going to get present to a fundamental loneliness. The more you open your heart, the more you will be present to this fundamental loneliness to our existence. And that's a function of the fact that the more I open my heart, the more I'm going to be able to feel that there is forever a gap between you and me. There will always be a gap between myself and you. No matter how much we work to be intimate, I can never be fully over there with you. And that is a fundamental loneliness that exists. And so this consciousness can never fully be connected with you. We can get close. We can find moments of really getting there. But fundamentally, there will always be a degree of separation. And so that is the path of the warriors, to like open our heart, knowing, almost to embrace that brokenheartedness and to allow that to take us deeper rather than trying to avoid the heartbreak, which is what most of us do. And so for me, that's the way I do it, is I learn to be with my heartbreak without making it mean that person's wrong or that I'm wrong or that something should be any different than the way it currently is. And I want to be super clear, that is ongoing work for me. I learned to my heartbreak because I couldn't be with it when I was young. I was often heartbroken. I'll share a very quick story here. I remember watching Shirley Valentine, which is a hilarious, now probably dated movie about this woman who is miserable in her relationship and kind of says, fuck this, and flies off to Greece, leaving her husband at home. And she has this great time and she really discovers herself, and she meets this handsome, sexy Greek man who is like, says things like, oh, you don't want to talk to me because you scared I tried to make fuck with you. And sorry if I'm saying that wrong, but and then she does make fuck with him, and then she is like, it puts color into her life, and she's excited and alive. And there's this scene where she's due to come back on the plane, and her husband knows this, and he's at the airport waiting for her, and he's holding flowers, and she doesn't come, and he's just left holding flowers. It's not an innocent party, right? He's neglected her. He's not loved this beautiful feminine that is in his life, but he's sitting there holding these flowers. And I remember as a kid, maybe 9 or 10, just crying, sobbing, feeling that man sitting there, not knowing necessarily what he did wrong, being left there. It's not even his fault, or it's not even her fault or anything like that, right? But just being with that heartbreak. And so I learned to create my heartbreak more as frustration and anger. And so often what shows up for me when people have possibility, the worst is when they can see it. Together we sit and they're like, oh my God, I can see what's possible. And then their fear has them run back in this direction. What is really, really challenging for me in those moments is to recognize, oh, my anger is really about my resistance to being heartbroken in this moment. And can I hold that heartbreak? Can I love this person and be with them and let myself be heartbroken with them? And sometimes that's all we can do as a coach, is really feel the heartbreak, not put it on them. Recognize that sometimes, often, a lot of that heartbreak is not even theirs, it's ours, just ours to feel. And sometimes we can share that with them and be like, hey, it's okay, but I'm present to, as you share that, I feel a lot of heartbreak about what you say you want and then where you are. We don't have to change any of it. And so in doing that, we become less annoying because we create less of a need to close this gap. That's often, if I feel heartbreak in the gap between what is and what is so, then one of the best solutions is to close it. So this is what people like me that learn to be cynical initially, I've solved the problem. I don't feel any heartbreak. Okay, that didn't work. I learned how to start being a coach. Oh, now I can see possibility. I still haven't done the deep, deep work. Hey, Hayden, I haven't done the deep, deep work to be able to be with my heartbreak. So instead, now I'm going to close the gap by going like this. I'll force you from what is so into this thing. And as we learn to just sit in the heartbreak of that without changing it, let ourselves, do whatever comes with being heartbroken, we stop needing the world to change and we stop needing others to change. And then a lot of the stuff that can be kind of annoying starts to, it's not like we ever run towards heartbreak. Well, some of us do, but that would probably be our work to take on. For the most part, that's not what we chase after, but it becomes something that we can recognize as like a gift, an opportunity to be with something new, an edge for us to lean into. So Evan, that's what I do. That's what's worked for me, is learning to see, oh, the gap is my heartbreak. Can I be with more of that? Brian, you asked really, and I would love to know what that is about so I can speak to it, because I think what you're asking there is probably going to open up a nice little bit for us to talk about. Jennifer, so much love to you. Yes, heartbreaking all the time. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate that. And let's see what you wrote here, Evan. As a student of Trungpa's work, I love how you weave that into conversations around possibility, sitting with what is. Yeah, I think it's one of the big challenges I notice the coaching profession has. I'll often meet coaches, and my commitment is to build intimacy with them, with anyone that I'm talking to. And I'll sit and they're like, "How's your day?" And I'll try to I want to answer that honestly. I want to give them a real answer instead of just saying, "Fine, how was your day? Let's get past this so we can talk about the deep shit." It's like, well, this is the deep shit. How was your day? What's the depth of how your day was? And so I'll say, I might share like, oh, I had a big fight with my wife, and that kind of sucked. But for the most part, things are pretty good, and blah 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 blah. And they will be so quick to be like, oh, but it's okay, and they try to put a spin on it or help me reframe the fight with my wife so I can see it in a better light. And that's all their stuff. Often, like there's what really serves us is when people just say, "Oh, I get it, that sucks," or whatever, rather than trying to make me feel better about how things went. That's their stuff. That's them doing this, closing the gap. Oh, you don't have to feel bad. Yeah, I know, but I don't have to feel good either. I don't have to feel anyway, and it's okay for me to feel however I feel. That's the gift of being a human. Okay, Brian, you think on that? I'll have a sip of tea here. Get out of here, GIFs that someone sent me. It was about the statement that we can never truly be intimately connected, and that knowledge is loneliness. Right. So I'm not saying we can never truly be intimately connected. I'm saying that no matter how much intimacy we create, how much of a union we create, there will forever be a gap by virtue of you are not me and never can be. And I can never fully, truly be you. No matter how close, no matter how intimately we connect, we can have very fleeting moments like in a heightened sexual experience or even like a psychedelically induced experience where we feel like we are in that together where it sort of courses away. But I assert that by and large there's forever a distance between us. We can never be completely the same thing because that's just the nature of consciousness. It's the nature of you and I. Now, on some level, the truth is we're all one, right? We're both. That's the nature of this duality that we live in. Is that on a spiritual level, we're all the same. We're all the universe becoming aware of itself, and that's really all we are. We're just a collection of stuff that's come together, and for a brief moment is conscious of all of this, and then we dissipate. So you could argue, well, but we are all one, so, but like in the vessel in which most of the time we embody our experience, I cannot be you. I don't want to keep talking about this too much because you guys are going to discover that I can only go so far in a metaphysical conversation before it bores everyone. Opening our heart, Evan says, opening our heart fully opens us to the pervasive heartbreak that always exists. We cannot open only to goodness. Evan, I always appreciate the poetry of your words. Well said. Our heart is not like a series of plumbing where I can turn on sadness or turn off sadness, but turn up joy. It's got one. It's a pipe with a bandwidth, so we can expand and decrease our bandwidth. People are sometimes surprised by this when they do all this work with me to expand their heart, so they can feel more love. But then they also find themselves needing more love. They're like, I feel needy. I feel sad. Of course you do. You've expanded your capacity for love. You can give much more of it than you ever could, but now you need much more of it too. As we broaden that pipe, whatever we can give, we also have to be able to receive. And so it's a two-way street, which is kind of beautiful, I think. Okay, well, that's a cool transition into what you had asked, Alexandra, which was, and thanks for this question, which was like, talk about the wisdom and value of rage. So you've very wisely not provided me any detail about that. So I'm gonna just riff a little bit, and this might be a bit of a shorter answer or topic we'll talk about. I just want to read what you wrote here too, Brian. You feel that I feel that was a belief taught to me to find that one special person to complete us. Now I understand better. Yeah, one special person, hey? I love that myth. I love the fantasy of that there's one person out there for me. The way I can uh, reframe that, I guess, is that there is one special person for me out here in this world, and it's the one I choose. The fact that Bay and I have chosen each other and choose each other again is what has us be the one person for each other. But I don't believe that there's some person I'm destined to find, and that like the reason this person's upsetting me that I'm in a relationship with is because they're not the one. Not so sure. That's just not the belief I empower. And consequently, when things are rough in my relationship, I'm not looking for the one out there. I'm like, well, this is the person I'm choosing. So how do I create magic and art with the one that I'm choosing in this moment? Okay, hit the desk. Fuck it. Let's talk about rage, the wisdom of it. So for me, really, this is the wisdom and value of anger. And then we can distinguish anger over and over and over again into many, many different varieties. So we could call it rage, we could call it frustration, we could call it pettiness, spitefulness, we could call it all of these things. And one that most people are not aware of, that I was trained in, and I really believe this, I assert that resignation is also a form of anger. And so the way one of my teachers, Christopher McAuliffe, taught this to me was initially we start with frustration. Something happens, we're like, fuck me. And when our frustration is not resolved and moved through our body. So by resolved, I don't mean the thing bothering you gets addressed and never happens again or anything like that. I mean that we resolve it internally. And often the way we resolve something internally is we express it. We allow ourselves to experience it and have it move through us. You've probably noticed that emotions stick with you a lot longer when you're in active resistance to them. This is why when people have a bad day at work, come home and just watch TV for 4 hours because they just need some chill time, that they wake up and they're angry at work again because they haven't actually, that chill time is like putting your being on pause. You're just a consumer, you're plugged into the system, and you can't, while you're watching TV, you rarely have this emotional experience because you're not really present to it. You're present to what's on TV. And so then the anger stays with you. So we start with frustration. Fuck me. When frustration is not addressed, expressed, experienced, resolved internally, it becomes anger. Fuck you. So I go from fuck me to fuck you. Now I'm pissed at you. Fuck you. And when anger, from frustration to anger, when anger is not resolved, it becomes resignation. Fuck it. Fuck it. What's even the point? And that's where we, if you look at these states, the graph looks kind of like it starts here, you get some frustration, then anger is where it rises up, and then resignation is where it sort of collapses in on itself. The nice thing about resignation is, why even bother getting angry? Nothing's going to change. Why even bother get present to this? Because nothing's going to make a difference anyhow. And so in that place, there's a bit of like safety. There's a bit of, well, at least I'm not getting bent out of shape over stuff. A lot of people, I got to say this through cupped hands. A lot of people, my microphone's over here, so cupping my hands actually has the opposite effect. A lot of people that will tell you they resolved their anger, what they've done is shift into a state of resignation, which is really fun when you're able to like do Hans. Everyone, I was talking about Hans, I was just sharing about Nathan, who I met through you, and how these shoes I designed through his website, and I was just bigging him up. So everyone, this is Hans. Follow Hans if you don't already. He's a beautiful human being. Love this man. And he came on right as I said, fuck you. It's perfect timing. So a lot of people are resigned in their life because that is easier than being with the parts of ourselves where we get invested, enrolled, excited, impassioned, all of that stuff about what's happening, but then can't be with it and explode in anger. And so instead we just come down to this place of resignation. And so the impact of this is you'll find people often are like, they're walking dead through their life. They're gray. There's no pallor to them. There's no thrill. There's no vitality. And so first of all, this is the state that which people walk through. And often people that will tell you they can help you not have anger, they can help you manage their anger, what they've done is go down through this to the point where their anger is no longer showing up as anger. Another way I like to think of it is they're drowning in it. So at first they're like slapping about on the water, like coughing a bit, and then they're really flailing around. And then the last stage is they're just drowning it. It's up to their head. They can't move. They can't see colors very well because they're seeing through water. And so um, where this leaves us is when someone comes to me initially and is like sharing that they have a lack of joy or something in their life. Usually that's where I'm looking, because resignation will rob you of all the joy, all the excitement, all the thrill in your life. It will steal those from you. And it will steal them not like a thief in the night. It will steal them like 1,000 cuts steals blood from your body. It will just slowly take all of the joy away from them in little sliver-like increments. And where this tends to leave people is in what they would describe as a depressive state. So the irony of all of this is that often there's clinical depression and then there's a depressive state. I'm asserting. I am not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I assert, however, that I be with people. I experience people where they are having this experience of life that feels quite depressive. It's gray. It's a flat line. That's resignation. And often what there is to do to support them is to have them start to learn to engage with their anger. Start to learn to engage with this emotion that they've been trained out of from a very early age. They were taught anger's wrong, anger's violent, anger's oppressive, anger's all of these things. Anger's secondary. It's a secondary emotion, which is true often. Anger is often a reflection of us being afraid, and then we get angry. But the danger of that is it's another way we can then try to bypass having to be with our anger, right? So like what people do with that one is they're like, oh, it's a secondary emotion, therefore I don't have to feel my anger. I can just go straight over here. It's not usually the way it works. We usually have to walk the long road back that we walked to get to where we are. There's not a lot of step skipping. That's what makes coaching work. That's why coaching gets you there faster, because it stops you trying to skip steps. And then you can move through the stuff and be with your life as it gets created. It's kind of ironic, but it speeds you up by slowing you down. So the wisdom in our anger comes from realizing like something's got me. And rather than trying to not be gotten, rather than trying to not have what experience there is for us to have, the real work is to like learn to be responsible when something gets us. So people often they veer from resignation to explosive anger because they haven't developed any ability to calibrate any of this stuff. You know, like if you imagine a sliding bar, you're going to be clear there's times when it's totally inappropriate for me to express anger in this moment. Some places when it is appropriate for me to express anger is when I've got a container where it's been set up to allow that. So maybe you're at a workshop and you're working on anger. That's a very appropriate place to do it. Or maybe a place that would be appropriate would be where I go to my wife and I say, I'm going to do some anger on purpose. It's nothing to do with you. If you hear me shouting in my bedroom, that's what's going on. And I go beat the living hell out of my pillow or scream into it or something like that. That's a place where I can practice moving this energy through my body without actually getting it on someone. And what we've learned to do from this story that anger, full scale, full stop, black and white is wrong, is these two extremes. We resist it, we resist it, we resist it, we get resigned, we're drowned out, and then we have these short bursts of explosive rage. Then we go back to resisting it because, oh my God, that rage was so damaging. I shouldn't be angry. I'm bad for that. And then we double back down on the old strategy, and then it just continues the cycle over and over and over again. Here's the other part of this that is the wisdom of our anger. Your emotions are always true. This is so important. Now, we need to put some nuance into that statement, because what people then think that mean is how I feel and what I think when I'm angry is true. My friend and I were playing, my friend Nathan Seward, some of you may know, I was visiting him in New York and we were playing, he was like, oh, bring your squash racket. I used to play a lot of squash. We played squash. He's very excited about playing squash. So we played squash. It was a real treat to play together. And I was beating him, which I like to say every time I bring up this story. And he paused because he was doing some work in this area too. And he shared, I notice right now I really want to punch you in the face. Like my anger is that I want to punch you in the face. I'm not going to, but I'm noticing that's what's showing up for me. This is the wisdom of the anger. Like what is true for him is this feeling that he wants to punch me in the face. What is not true is that he ought to punch me in my face or do anything associated with it. That's just the anger and the shape it's taking in the moment. And so, yes, Lindsay, totally agree. Squash, amazing sport, so fantastic. And so we really want to honor the truth of what's showing up as it's showing up, as, oh, this is an emotion showing up. I am angry in this moment and it's saying things at me. My anger wants me to do things. I'm not going to act on it, but I'm going to honor that that's what's showing up. Instead, what we do is a bunch of other calisthenics. We do stuff like, well, why do I feel that way? Or we try to do this thing where we say, I shouldn't feel angry. Fear is our favorite one to do this. Why am I afraid of that? I shouldn't feel afraid of that. I know that that's not really going to happen. Why do I need to be? Oh my God, stop, please. It's exhausting. It doesn't work either because what's true is that you feel afraid. That is a truth. What's true is that you feel angry. So our work often is not in trying to rationalize away the way we feel, not trying to justify or argue with it, but rather to accept the truth. Oh, the truth right now is that I'm angry and I want to punch Adam in the face. And I'm not going to do that. But that's what's currently getting created. That's what's being catalyzed in my body. And if we can start to create that, what we are doing is holding ourselves with a degree of reverence. We're honoring what's showing up. And there's kind of a duality to it, right? We're totally honoring what's showing up and letting it be there. And at the same time, being responsible for our impact in the world. That changes the world when we can do that. So often, I share this story and then I'm going to move on. Often, this is what there is to do with our anger, is to start to become acquainted with it. Not spray it on people, but become acquainted with it and then get responsible for it. The story I'll share, and you may have heard me share this before. If it's a rerun, I apologize. I was leading coach training, myself and my partner, who's a beautiful man that I love very much. We're training a room of coaches. And we were doing an exercise at the end of the year of this work where we had them all get clear, like, hey, what are you still holding on us? Like, what are you holding as wrong? What are you mad at us for? What are you holding energetically on us and this program? We have everyone write that down and then we support them in moving through it so that they can end the program clean and clear. So that's a very powerful process and it's one that takes a lot of generating. What I mean when I say generating is I have to keep generating my being rather than my reaction. My reaction is the automatic. People say, well, I didn't like Adam when you did this thing and you said that. And there's a part of me that's like, well, I didn't say it that way and you're wrong for that. And actually what I was pointing to, no, none of that's going to help the person. What does that person need to move beyond this? And this thing was going long and we'd blown past lunch. We were probably 2.5 hours out. I was really hungry and I was conscious that my team was really hungry. And everyone else in the room that was going through this exercise, they'd ordered lunch, but we'd kind of like not done that. We were holding the space. We weren't going to eat as they were sharing this to us. And I wrote a note to the man leading this with me, and I said, hey, I really think my team should eat. And he said, he wrote back and said something along the lines of like, you need to put your attention on what's going on in the room rather than on how you feel about food. He said it much more artfully than that, but it really pissed me off. So I took a break. I went into the men's washroom. I checked all the stalls, make sure there's no one here. And I went into one of the stalls and I very, very like methodically, like a sociopath would do right before murdering someone. I took the toilet paper off the roll and I put it up against the wall and I just pounded my elbow into it. I just beat the hell out of that toilet roll. I moved some of that anger through my body. I came back and I sat down and I finished the exercise. And then afterwards we cleaned up. He acknowledged, like, I'm really clear for myself. One of the things I can do is always put my needs last. So I'm going to have a bit of a bias. And there's something I want to invite you to see where your bias is, Adam. So all of that started to open up on the other side of me letting that anger move through me. But otherwise, I was just going to hold on to it. And that's an example of me being committed to my responsibility for my anger, not trying to stuff it down and operate over top of it, but acknowledge that it's there. Hey, I got to just take a break. I'll be right back. I'm okay. I promise I'll be back shortly. Ka! Just karate the toilet paper to death. Come back. Okay. Let's read what you guys have been writing. Alexander, you say you have so many or you feel like you have so many preconceived notions of how much anger a woman should feel. Yeah, I mean, societally, we've done an injustice to women where anger is concerned. We've also done an injustice to men, but I think women have felt that one more. And we've done an injustice to men about sadness. And we've done an injustice to women about sadness too. Like there's shades for all of them, but we really don't have good role models for this, and we really don't have we just don't see this sort of thing. You know, in movies, the way it goes is when the person gets angry, they're explosive about it, they feel wrong, they apologize, but you never really see them do the deeper work where they learn to create a new relationship to their anger or anything like that. They just make themselves wrong for expressing anger at someone and then apologize for it, and then hopefully they never do it again. Um, you're saying you're really interested in becoming more comfortable with seeing, feeling, expressing anger in myself. I think that's a beautiful practice. If we can just, usually the first practice I'll give people when they're experiencing this kind of resignation or just this lack of something they want would be simply notice when you already are angry. See if you can find just the quietest voice of that anger rising up through the sea of resignation that you're more used to. Can you just hear that and identify, oh, I'm getting angry. Oh, I'm angry right now. If all we did was that, we're going to start to get more honest with ourselves. Heather says she's totally been there where she's heard that anger is a secondary emotion, but I also have limited ability being with anger. So to simply have permission to bypass it is a great solution. Yeah. And it is true, often anger is over top of our fear, just like you heard from me, anger is an easier way for me to feel my heartbreak, which you could argue is probably about fear at the most basic level. And so it's great. And like everything, is that serving you, is that distinction serving you to be with what there is for you to be with, or is it giving you another way to bypass it, but a sexier, cooler, more conscious minded way of bypassing the thing? That's what we're all kind of getting fooled by, as we're finding these sexy, cool ways to bypass what we don't want to be with. Let's see, Brian, you have, hey, Sherifat, nice to have you with us. And hi, Carla, as well. Brian, you say you have a rage cage method you will revisit now that you're aware of your inner anger. That's awesome. Um, there's a show called Delocated that is absolutely stupid, hilarious, but the sort of humor that I can't recommend that show to most people because they will just, it'll go over their head or they won't get it. Anyhow, the main character, the whole premise of the show is the main character is this total ass who entered the witness protection program, and then they made a reality TV show about him being in the witness protection program. He's always wearing a mask. He's just a total boob. He's such a dumbass. Anyhow, they have an episode where he creates the rage cage, literally that. And he meets this girl who comes in and is like, "Oh, well, how does this work?" And then she smashed all these plates. She's like, "Wow, I felt better than like 6 years of my therapy," which I was just like, "That's great." And there's some truth to that in as much as we want to be distinguishing what the anger is about, so we're not just raging out anger, but the start is often we got to move that energy. Miles says, "What does healthy confrontation of anger look like?" I don't know that I'd call it confrontation. So healthy expression of anger is what I would say we want to go for. And the example would be like I gave Miles, where maybe it is at the start, it might just be noticing when we're angry. And then the next stage might be to simply scream into our pillow, punch the pillow, buy shitty plates and hurl them against a fence or something like that. And all of those things, here's the thing about it, is they feel silly and stupid. And at first we will feel like we don't have anger. Why am I doing this? I don't feel like I have anger. Well, you wouldn't. If you've learned to come down into this place of resignation, you're not going to be present to your anger. And so doing the thing that you would do when healthily expressing anger will allow it to rise up. And then then you'll start to get more in touch with it, and then things can grow from there. Okay. Great question, Alexandra. Thank you. Great topic. I'm going to talk about our impact during times like these, and then I'm going to talk about staying committed on a daily basis, and I think that'll be the end of this. So what I've noticed, I'm a part of a few groups. I've got many people on Facebook I'm connected with that are uh, coaches or people that have a following of sorts or stuff like that. And I've seen it's been really interesting because as we've moved through Thanksgiving, I've seen a lot of people in gatherings without any mask or anything like that, like just holding each other, hugging, smiling, a lot of photos being shared. And what I don't want to do is make them wrong. I don't want to make them wrong for their decision. Your decision is entirely your decision. And while as an individual, I think that is wrong. By which I mean, I think that what there is to do in this moment is to bring caution, to bring prudence, and to do the simple things we can do to collectively move through this sooner, even and especially those things that are inconvenient. It's one of the things that I admired so much about our prime minister was he came on, he did a thing where he was announcing increased lockdowns in Canada, and he shared, look, I don't want to do this, and you don't want to do this. This isn't what we want to do going into the holidays. We don't want to lock down more, and it sucks. And he also, I love this. He talked about this attitude we can get where we're like, I've been doing so much already, and that person over there is not even wearing a mask. I should get to do this thing. And he was saying, now's not the time for that. Now is the time to honor the spirit as well as the intention and the law of what we're creating. Don't let yourself off the hook by looking at someone else and saying, at least I'm doing better than them, and then that gives me a free pass. I really admire that leadership, and I really think that wearing masks does make a difference because how the fuck can it not? Having a barrier between my mouth and the rest of the world, I just cannot fathom how that wouldn't make a degree of difference. Now I also want to own at this juncture that it's fucking annoying for me to wear a mask because I got a beard and it doesn't fit quite right, and so then it's often riding down on my nose, and I constantly have to keep pulling it up, and I feel stupid, and I don't like it, and I don't breathe as clearly. All of that is really honor. Sorry, really, I read your your comment there, Lindsay. All of that is really annoying for me, and I'm committed to something greater than my own feelings and my own comfort and all of that stuff. That being said, if people don't want to wear masks, that's okay. What I notice are these photos getting shared, and I'm left in a bit of a quandary because I'm like, man, first of all, I'm uncomfortable seeing that. I'm just like, dude, what are you doing? Like, that's just a lot of transmission. And the evidence is pretty clear. These super spreading events are the worst ones. And it's not like we don't have enough news telling us, hey, the thing's rising. So what I'm most present to when I look at this from a lens of like, what can I distinguish about this? And what do I see from a lens of leadership? Is that I really see people not present to the impact of how they're showing up. And specifically, what I mean in this is when people post photos of themselves at large gatherings, not wearing masks, what that does is it sends a message to other people that, hey, you don't need to wear a mask because I don't, and I'm a coach, and I'm calling myself conscious, and I'm doing all that stuff. Hey, you don't need to stay cloistered for a while, not for a long time, but for a while, so that we can kind of move through this together. You don't need to do any of that stuff. And so, free of making them right or wrong for any of it, I think that what we would all like to see, hopefully, is that we be more cautious rather than less. I think if it's not a mask for you, if it's not a mask for you, you probably already are soon to unfollow me. But if it is, let's say it's not a mask for you, but you're like, I wish people would do more of this. Great, then consider that all of it is in the spirit. All of whatever the thing you think is the right thing to do is in the spirit of being more cautious. And if that's so, I think that it's important for us to recognize that the photos we post in public media tell people a story. That is an impact we have. You won't see me posting photos of me holding loved ones close because, one, I'm trying not to do that. I'm not doing that at all right now. But even if I did, I'm conscious of the fact that that's going to have an impact in the world. People are going to see me and they're going to go, oh, well, Adam's doing it. Maybe it's okay for me to do it too. And so this is just a beautiful opportunity for us to really get present to the fact that as someone who is a leader, and all I mean by that is someone who's committed to having any kind of impact in the world, you are always having an impact. And your impact is continual and constant and always being made visible, seen, true in the world. This is why when someone says like, I don't want to be a role model, I say that's a cop out. You already are. You're already having an impact. And regardless of, whether you want people to follow your actions or not, it's worth bearing in mind that people are doing that. And so do you want to pick up that mantle of being a leader or not? It's okay if not. But what I find I'm kind of disappointed in are the people that call themselves coaches, the people that call themselves conscious, the people that call themselves leaders that are doing this stuff. Now, that doesn't mean never post the photos. One, or never post any photos. Ideally, don't have those gatherings. But if you do, please stop sharing them out, giving people the impression, yeah, let's have more of these gatherings, because that's not what we're trying to do right now. Please don't make that what you're trying to do. What you can do though is I've seen people post photos of themselves holding loved ones, hanging out with their friends, and then they put a comment at the bottom saying, by the way, this was taken 4 weeks ago before we went back into lockdown or whatever. And what that is a beautiful example of someone being responsible for their impact. They're considering, oh, people might see this and think I'm blah, 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 blah. I'm going to make a note so that people get that. And finally, the distinction I want to draw here is that you're not doing this so that people don't dislike you or so that people think you're okay. That's one reason people won't do. They're like, fuck it. I'm going to post this photo of myself because I don't care what you think. Great. But you're totally blind to your impact from that lens. And it's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is getting responsible for your impact, the impact you're having, rather than worrying about what people think about you. And so the way those sound differently is on the one hand, it's like, I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And I'm going to post photos because I want to share. Like it's all about what I want to do. I'm not going to let people stop me from posting photos when I've had a great time and I'd like to share that with the world. On the other hand, we're saying, I would love to post these photos. I had a great time. I would love to share some cheer and some joy. And I would love to like lift people's spirits and show them that it doesn't have to be all gloom. And I'm conscious that when I do that, part of the impact might be that people then themselves feel inclined to be less cautious. And then it actually worsens the spread of this stuff. So you don't have to do anything with any of that, but that's what I'm really present to these days is especially those of committed to being leaders. Please really take a look and see like, hey, what is there for me to be present to as far as my impact is concerned? Let's see what you wrote here. Evan, what if the impact you want to make has nothing to do with what the government is telling you to do? Well, I would ask first of all, there we go, we're back. That was strange. I'd be curious about the impact you want to make, and it all ties in. So if we had a leader, like part of the impact there would be, as I watch someone like that, oh, this leader is simply unaware of their impact. Like, is the impact they're committed to having that people do more stuff, that people show up more and be less cautious or more like, I suppose we could get to a point where it's like, oh, are you guys finding my camera is going squilgy? Why is it doing that? Why are you squilging me, camera? Okay, well, we're going to try a little bit longer and we'll see if it's going to work. I'm going to read your follow-up here, Evan. This whole conversation is still through the context of what is right and wrong in your opinion about this. Maybe the impact you want to have is to show that you don't wear a mask around your loved ones. That is leadership too. Super steeped in right and wrong. Right, so absolutely. To begin with, I think I've been clear that I have a belief about what is right. Remember, I'm inviting people to consider, do you want people to be more cautious in this time when that's what we are collectively trying to do, I think? Or do you want to, do you want people to be more brazen, for example, or less cautious might be a way to think about it. So, okay, great. It's coming back quickly. And so that's where I'm inviting people to look. Wow, that's really annoying. It keeps chopping. I wonder what's going on. Sorry, guys. I'll look into this after the fact. I'd love to hear what you see, Evan, from this, like for yourself or how you relate to this. Because at the end of the day, there is like, a degree of right or wrong. And we could get into the conversation about like what has scientifically been proven for the most part. And then we could go down that rabbit hole. what I would love to see is people being more responsible for their impact. Okay. I'm going to finish by, yeah, I think the last one will be staying committed on a daily basis. So, Andrew, you asked this question, and you said, when I set targets and goals, how do I keep myself committed on a daily basis, knowing that I'll have resistance along the way? So, one of the best, first of all, knowing that we're going to have resistance is the first step. Having an understanding, oh, I'm going to have resistance to doing this. If we can just come to an acceptance of that, we're already a little bit further ahead of the game than we might otherwise be. A friend of mine used to enroll people in a project of his. It was a year-long program, and he'd ask them, one of the questions he'd ask them was, how will you quit this program? And what a very analytical guy, so he did a lot of analytics, and he found that the people who would answer that question by saying, there's no way I'm going to quit, I absolutely am not going to quit, you can probably guess this, 100% were the ones that would quit more often than not by vast swaths beyond the rest of the people. The percentages were way more weighted in that direction. So that's a great example of how, in come back to me, camera, the punch that we don't see coming is the one that hurts us the most. When we aren't even willing to consider the fact that we might have resistance and that it might lead to us quitting, that blindsides us. And when we get blindsided, we're not ready for it. So it just knocks us off the rails. So the first step is to just acknowledge, yep, I'm going to have resistance to this, and to allow that to be, and to not try to make it so like I'm a man who never has resistance and I just always do what I say I'm going to do. Second thing I do is I empower structure a lot in my life. So for example, initially, for a long time, my morning routine was very sporadic. I would get up at 6 some days, I'd get up at 8 other days. If I'd made an appointment at 8 o'clock, I would make sure I was up at least with enough time to brush my teeth, but there wasn't much routine or anything like that. And I wanted to start to break that up. I wanted to create something different. And make sure I'm not showing anything important here. Yeah, there's no numbers there. And so I was like, I want a routine of sorts, and I'm not happy with, like, it doesn't feel good rolling out of bed and just sort of trying to make this happen and hoping for the best and then beating myself up and all of that sort of stuff. So I created a routine, which is a form of structure. By creating a routine, what I mean is that I articulated in very clear details what I was going to do in my routine. And then I printed it and I put it right here by my desk, called routine plans. There's my morning routine. 5:15, I'm awake. 5:30, set aside prayer, masculine practice or meditation. 6:30, writing for an hour, and so on and so forth. And for the first while, this sat, you can see there, right here by my desk, staring at me, because I would roll out of bed and then I would start doing all of the stuff I would do that was easier than my routine. I'd check email. I'd start chatting to my friends. I would just sort of space out in front of my computer instead of doing what there was for me to do, doing what I was committed to doing. And so in taking that on, that began to create a bit of a structure. I also learned that other structures that support me are things like making appointments with people. So initially, when I had, I think it was 6 o'clock, I had masculine practice, meditation, some kind of masculine practice. I created an appointment with another man who was practicing with me at 6 a.m. And we'd get up at 6 a.m., get on the Zoom, work through it, and then end the call. It was just 15 minutes. Hey, how's it going? Great. Let's do Ego Eradicator. Great to be with you. See you tomorrow. I realized I'm really reliable when I bring other people into the mix. When there's someone else that's going to wait for me in the morning and expect me to show up, I'm really reliable to show up. The same is true for appointments. Like, oftentimes I get scared, especially if it's like a possibility of having a conversation with someone who is sort of at another level from the one I've currently been playing at. So recently I've been getting into connection with people that have Wikipedia pages, which is kind of cool. But it's also kind of intimidating. I'm like, oh, fuck, this person has a Wikipedia page. I don't have a Wikipedia page yet. And and so that drives up some fear. And what my fear wants me to do is cancel the call and reschedule it another week out, which sometimes I'll do. But I'm much less likely to do that when we've made the appointment beforehand. I'm much less likely to do that when we've both gone through the process of scheduling, we've got it in our calendar and it's sitting there. Whereas if it was just sort of something impromptu, I'm liable to just run away. This also holds true for I'm in the process of recording coaching calls and then getting feedback on them to certify for my master coach certification. And it was super interesting. First of all, it's hard getting this feedback, and I'm like, am I doing it wrong? What's the right way? All that stuff. And so I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I had the appointment. I made it with my client, and it was like record call with Doug. We both knew I was going to be recording the call. And during the day, I was dreading it. And I was like, maybe I need to cancel that call and I'll do it next week. And then I don't have to do it this week. I can just forgo it. But I'd set up so much based on this appointment happening. So I had this call being scheduled. Doug and I both knew about it. And then the next week, I'd set up an appointment with Fran, my mentor, who was going to go and review the call. And she needed me to give her the call before. So there's all this stuff there that kind of it provided enough momentum to push me back from what my resistance wanted me to do, which was be like, fuck it. Let's just reschedule the call. Doug, I'm sick. I can't do it today. Let's do it another day. So these are all examples of structure that really support me to do what I'm here to do what I'm committed to do. And there's no right answer to any of this. There's the truth is that whatever the structure is that supports you is the structure that supports you. And one of the things, I'll give you a few more, but like one of the things that gets in people's way is they resist structure full scale. So they won't even commit to empowering any structure because they're like, I don't think it's going to work. And then they have no structure, so their resistance gets the better of them, and the thing they want to do doesn't happen, thereby in some weird kind of way proving that it wouldn't work. And so then they just loop like this and never actually move forward. So we have to empower the structure. We have to be willing to say, like, I'm going to put this in place and I'm going to honor it. One of the ways I remember someone on one of my teams, I think this might have been it's either pre-Trump or like early days of Trump. She said, hey, money, that guy's created a bunch of breakthroughs. I'll tell you this much, because people are like, I'm going to donate money to him if I don't do the thing I'm going to do. And she was very committed. I'm not going to do it. No, 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 no. And she was actually leading the team. I was developing her leadership. She was leading the team. She made this declaration. She didn't do the thing she was going to do. And then she was like, I can't donate that money. He's just too horrible. Well, that's an example of not empowering the structure you've chosen. So if you create structure and then you just blow through it, well, it won't work, right? You can defeat any structure. What works is when we're willing to really honor what we set up. So like I usually check with people very clearly, hey, are you really clear you're going to do this no matter what? You're either going to do the thing you say you want to do, or you're going to follow through with this. Because if you don't, it's just not going to work. Are you clear? And they get very clear. And when they get very clear, they're reliable to do the stuff. It has them get beyond their resistance. There was one more piece. Oh, yes, that's right. The other thing that serves people so much and that absolutely serves me are declarations. People resist the crap out of a declaration. Here's how a declaration sounds. I will have this by this, or a what by when. So declaration might be, I will have my MCC by this time in February 28th, 27th, 28th, 2020, what are we in, 2021. That's a declaration. And what people do is like, but I don't know how. I don't know how to make that declaration. I don't know how to get there. That's right. The declaration is what's going to force you to figure out how to get there. Instead, what most of us do is we try to figure out all of the answers and then we'll make a declaration. But you have no skin in the game. You have nothing forcing you towards that. And so consequently, because we're unwilling to make the declaration because we're afraid of failing, we never actually start. And then since we never actually start, we just putz around and we never do the thing. So declarations are probably one of the most powerful tools people can make. Public declarations where they share, I'm going to do this by this date. Then once you've done that, you got shit to do. And if you don't do it, you've got some shit to do too. You got to clean that up. You got to clean up whatever mess that created. Clean up whatever got happened. Whatever got created, whatever didn't happen, whatever did happen. Guys, I'm sorry. I know Facebook keeps telling me it's interrupting my video. It's very frustrating. I don't know what's going on there. Apologies to everyone. So declarations, very powerful tool. And usually when people are like, I really want to do this thing, but it's not happening, that's the first place I look. Like, okay, well, do you have a declaration on the table? Well, what do you mean? Do you have a date by when it's going to be finished? Well, no, because I'm not doing it. So I want to make sure that, I blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, that's not going to work. Let's take a look at this. So I really recommend practicing empowering declarations in your life. Take those on. Whatever it is that you say you want to create a declaration around it, and not like a 10 years out declaration. That's the trouble with impossible goals. They're like way out in the ether. There's nothing on the line, and there's no declaration made. So it's just like a nice to have. It's like wishing on a star for something. It's about as effective as wishing on a star. And sometimes wishing on a star will have it be a little more present in our mind, but it's not going to move you forward like a declaration will. Andrew says, how would you adjust if, say, I made the declaration and then didn't reach it by the said date? So in the grand scheme of things, when we're designing a project, we'd look at like, what's the declaration overall? And then what are the milestones? So that we can break it up instead of like, I will have a fully made computer software program that sells for $20,000 by this time next year. Great, now we want some milestones, because otherwise what tends to happen is we get all the way to like a week before and we're like, I've done nothing, fuck, I'm not going to make my deadline. So we want to break down milestones, one, to make your task easier, so you just have to look at the month ahead, but two, so that once you bypass that, once you see like, oh, what I've set, it's not working, we can take a look at what there is to do. We can look at, hey, what's going on? What's having it go this way? What's having it not go the way you want? And we can coach that and support you to create a different relationship, a different experience, a different way of showing up, other than it didn't work, so I'm going to quit, which is what most of us do. So we begin with a commitment, we create milestones, we design a project around it, and then that actually allows us to really get to work and see what's not working. Okay, I've been talking for quite a while. I think it's time for us to wind down. Evan says, you get up with men 8 a.m., 5 days a week. We change leadership each time, big time accountability container. Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things of men's work in general, and women's work too, but like, I think men's work tends to be more focused on accountability and integrity because that tends to be the nature of the masculine energy. It's very focused, purpose, trustability, and that's setting a time to meet is a very powerful tool. Bay has a lot of people that she gets up and writes with. She's got friends where every Monday at 8:30, she's on the Zoom call with them writing. I've actually been share if this is something you'd be interested in. I don't know that I'll do it, but I'm very reliable to get up every morning and write. And I've been debating if I want to open up one of those mornings every week to do sort of a shared writing group. So all we would do is come into the group, say hi, we're going to get started, and then we all write. So it'd basically be like an accountability structure for that. The other thing, there's one more piece I realized I want to talk about as far as accountability, which is that the most powerful way we can create accountability for ourselves is to relate to it like an accountant. What an accountant does is they look at the books and they say, here's where you're in deficit, these are your liabilities, and these are your assets. Here's the negatives, here's the positives, speaking of money. That's our job. If we want to become more accountable in our life, it's not to smack ourselves in the back of the head for not doing what we said we would do. That's not accountability. That's self-loathing. That's self-hate. What accountability is to practice continually, moment by moment, showing up and saying, this is what I did and this is what I didn't. And what's going to happen is, as you do that more and more with a group of people committed to the same results as you are, you're going to get feedback on the impact of you doing that. So you're going to be like, hey, when you show up that way, it really it makes me feel kind of left behind. And you're going to have to keep getting that feedback, which is going to be a little bit annoying, but it's also going to clue you into like the impact you're having. And the more we're willing to listen to that feedback and notice the impact that it's having in ourselves and other people, that allows us to start to change. Not because we should, but because there's a different impact that we're actually committed to having. That's where accountability is created. It's not created by me making you do something. It's created by me supporting you or anyone supporting you to be more and more honest with yourself. And that creates magic. Okay. Um, I hope you guys have an amazing Friday, a really great weekend, and an awesome December. We will be back. The podcast will keep going. I won't be doing Friday lives necessarily, although I'm setting that break up to every morning. I'm usually going to be doing some kind of work, not necessarily client calls, but like something else. And we may be doing Friday live. So I don't know. It'll be kind of whimsical in how I feel. Almost certainly I'll be on the calls at some point. So I hope you all have a fantastic holiday season. Happy Thanksgiving to my U.S. brethren, and have a great weekend, guys. Bye for now.